once again from the studios of UNO Television on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider this, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
To put his family back together, Daniel Hillard needed a job.
Do you have any special skills?
I do voices.
Yeah! Nancy and I are still looking for the other half of my head.
Look at me right now, Moneypenny. I want to undo that bow and get to know you.
Mr. Hillard, do you consider yourself humorous?
I used to.
And a decent home for his kids.
How do you like it?
Can't you just tell Mom you're sorry?
But he found a way.
I'm placing an ad for a housekeeper.
Housekeeper? Could you make me a woman?
To have both.
Wow.
Let's pray.
Hello? Euphigenia Doubtfire.
Papa's got a brand new bag.
He's still the same old dad. Only better.
Dinner is served, madam.
I'd love to get reacquainted.
Can't you see the lust in that man's eyes?
Accent's a little kind of muddled there.
Really? Well, so's your tan. The terrorists, they ran that way. It was a run by fruiting.
This holiday season,
Surprise!
Robin Williams, Sally Field,
Who needs a husband when I've got you?
in a Chris Columbus film,
Back off!
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Got it, Tom, here.
A father's work is never done.
My first day as a woman. I'm getting hot flashes.
A classic, Mrs. Doubtfire, is a story about a father who'll do just about anything to spend time with his children. The question is, should he have to? Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, shared parenting. Joining us to talk more about it are two Nebraska attorneys. The first is Chris Johnson, here from Hastings. He is a member of the Parenting Act Evaluation Panel. Next to him is Angela Dunn, an Omaha attorney. She was a member of the Nebraska State Bar Association Ad Hoc Committee on Parenting Time. She was also one of three attorneys who drafted compromise parenting time legislation that was introduced in the legislature this year. Welcome to the two of you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
All right, Chris, we'll start with you. Your definition of a parent.
It is what it is. A parent is someone who has a child and wants to or has to maintain that relationship with the child, someone whose rights have not been terminated or somehow or another had their rights taken away from them.
Okay, thank you. And Angela, what about a child?
I have the easier answer. A child in Nebraska is any individual who is under the age of 19.
Okay. And Chris, we've heard the term parenting time, right? So when does that come into play and what is that?
Parenting time is what visitation used to be. Everyone that's involved in our circles knew what visitation was. It used to be that when there was a couple that would get a divorce or a couple who wasn't married who split up, that they'd have to find a way as to keep both parents somehow involved in the child's life, and so it was visitation where one parent would have all the rights to the child and the other parent would have some visitation where they would get to come and see the child, spend some time with the child, almost like a glorified uncle for males. We have put a different nomenclature on it now, not because we've really changed a whole lot, but it just sounds better to say parenting time instead of visitation.
Okay, and what is the current law in Nebraska pertaining to this issue?
Well, the current law would be encompassed in what we call the Parenting Act, which was a statute that was enacted, 5 to 7 years ago, that tried to rewrite a lot of what we do in terms of how we proceed with divorces and such. But the current law speaks in terms of parenting time.
Okay. And how does Nebraska then compare to other states?
With what respect?
Well, in that regard. So, talking about shared parenting today, right? So, Overall, how do we compare?
I think that there is a definite national trend to, there's been a lot of research, a lot of recognition that what has been done in the past, where you have a parent and you have a visitor, that's not working out well for children. Children suffer as a result. So if what we're trying to do is address the best interests of the child rather than the best interests of a parent, then the system that we have now in place is broken. It's not working. It's not doing what we would want it to do. So there is a national trend towards more and more shared parenting. Everyone learned in kindergarten that sharing is good, selfishness is bad, and so more and more people look for opportunities to share their children.
Okay, thank you. And Angela, tell us about LB 1000.
Well, to speak to one of the points that Chris made and to clarify just a little bit, under the structure of our Parenting Act, the courts are required to do an analysis of what is in the best interest of the child. So in terms of how that fits nationally, usually you have statutes that look at the best interest of the child, or you have statutes that will move to what we call a presumption of shared parenting time. Nebraska right now falls in the best interest of the child category. The national movement, like he indicated, is to move toward presumption. So LB 1000, this gets to your question, LB 1000 was a bill introduced to revise our existing Parenting Act to encourage more shared parenting, whether it be through joint legal custody, and that relates to decision making, or in more sharing of time between parents. So LB 1000 is an extension of several bills that have come up through the years, I think going back to 2008. This was the updated version. They tend to get more mild as people are trying to reach consensus. And I was one of the attorneys who worked on modifying LB 1000 to capture as many views as we could. And so we worked for the past several months on an amendment to LB 1000 related to keeping the best interest intact, but expanding it so that we were making sure that there was a better effort at shared parenting time that doesn't exist in Nebraska today.
And I think the reason for that, and the reason for the national trend, is that we want to keep the best interests of the child at the fore. If mom and dad are going to get divorced, that's up to them. The children don't really have a voice in that. But I think the reason that other states are moving more towards a presumption that we're going to start with some type of sharing arrangement put in place is the societal research on that issue says that the best interests of the child are furthered by having both parents heavily involved in the life of the child, and time matters. It's not the Disneyland dad, it's not the weekend uncle. Time really does matter. And so research has shown us that it's not just the amount of contacts, it's the amount of time that children spend with their parent that really creates long-lasting positive effects for the child. So it's a merging of those ideas of best interests of the child and presumptions, because the best interests of the child, in fact, are that we have lots of time with both parents.
Well, sounds fair enough. So what happened to LB 1000?
The efforts of, they were from various attorneys from across the state, because one of the things that we learned in the ad hoc committee over the last year, that was a committee put together through the Nebraska State Bar Association. One of the things that we learned, in addition to the social science research, was that there was inconsistent application of the Parenting Act across the state. So I practice primarily in Omaha, which is Douglas and Sarpy counties. We see very different results in those counties than we do in western parts of the state. So the wake-up moment was we would like to have higher judicial accountability, in the sense that we would like to know, why is there such a great disparity? So we had lawyers from different areas of the state, and my role became that of working with domestic violence groups to make sure that we were adequately protecting families where domestic violence was at issue, and working with groups who were advocating 50-50 parenting time, and looking at where can we all come together and what can we all be comfortable with. So We've worked since January 1 up to this last week, working very hard at reaching compromise. I think that we arrived at a compromise amendment, and that was submitted to the Judiciary Committee for review. It's the responsibility of the Judiciary Committee to advance a bill to the floor for debate and voting, and it hasn't yet moved past the Judiciary Committee. If it doesn't advance this session, the bill will die, and we fully expect that a renewed bill would be introduced next year, and this dialogue would continue. We're just not sure. We have a very short time left in the session this year. It's not anticipated that LB 1000 as amended will advance. If it doesn't, this issue will not go away.
It won't go away. I think that your question, so what happened, I think we had weak leadership in the Judiciary Committee. We had a chairman of that committee who thought that they needed to have consensus amongst the members of the committee before they would pass the bill onto the floor. And you have different viewpoints on that committee. And so if you're looking for consensus, but somebody's thinking that red is red and someone's thinking red is purple, it's just not going to happen. And so because it couldn't happen, rather than move a bill forward that the domestic violence community had come in to support, thanks a lot to Angela's work and others around the area, a lot of shared parenting advocates were willing to accept it as compromise language, and it was compromise. People worked very hard to get that. And I've never seen a bill where so many people were supporting it from these different viewpoints, and yet the committee still decided not to let it go. I think there were, at one point there was 4 people voting for it and 4 people voting against it, but I have hopes for next year, and that some of these people that I thought were weak have been termed out.
Yeah, weak is pretty harsh. Behind the scenes, when you talk about four people being pro, 4 anti, what's the dialogue going on in terms of the people who aren't supporting?
We don't know.
Have no idea.
We're not privy to the conversations that take place with the Judiciary Committee. We are able to go and testify at the public hearings, which I did. So we hear the questions that they ask. We know what might be of interest to them. We write letters to them. But the truth is, we have no idea what is said behind closed doors. We don't know how much other bills or other politics are playing into the discussion related to shared parenting time. We just don't know. But our hope is that it will advance next year. I agree with Chris that this was the first time we really saw as many people supporting one version of an amendment. That hadn't happened in several years, if ever.
Hasn't happened ever.
So we're proud of that effort, and I believe it will be an easier step to move forward next year, because now we have some solid momentum with multiple viewpoints coming to some point of, can we all live with this? And that's where we had ended up. So we don't know what happened with the Judiciary Committee. I'm not going to be as harsh probably as Chris, because I'd like to give the benefit of the doubt. And I do know, being introduced into the legislative world this year, there's a lot that goes on that is beyond really my comprehension of their process and how it all works. So we're hopeful for next year.
Okay, so for those viewers who are just joining us, we're talking about shared parenting today. And Angela, in a nutshell, when somebody comes to you and says, okay, so what is that really? Just in a nutshell, how do you explain that to them?
It's co-parenting after divorce. Shared parenting can look very different to any different family. In my own family, I'm a divorced mom as well as a divorce lawyer, and my daughters were 5 and 7 when I divorced, and we very intentionally approached the divorce that we wanted to co-parent. We didn't have discussions about one of us having more time over the other, because that wasn't an option for either of us. We're both really good parents. We knew that going forward, we would continue to be good co-parents. We always had been. That had never been a source of dispute in our marriage. We knew that post-divorce, we would be able to effectively work together with our children. So that's the approach that we took. We had a high level of communication. That's not exactly present in each divorcing situation, so I realized that we were unique in that way. We had an ability to communicate very regularly about our girls' needs in terms of how we transitioned to shared parenting, children don't need a lot of information. We presented them with dry erase calendars of mom days, dad days, so they could see what it would look like, take away some of the fear. Since the divorce, my 9-year-old daughter has said that she likes that it's fair. She understands the concept of fairness, and she knows that there are classmates where it's not all the same mom days and all the same dad days. She knows that that exists in her situation. So from a child's standpoint, just to fulfill the idea of fundamental fairness, she thinks that's a good idea. So when people talk to me about shared parenting or what their parenting time structure might look like, what I have observed, and this isn't social science, but what I have observed is that children do as well as their parents do. If the parents are happy and satisfied with the arrangement that's worked out, generally the kids will follow suit. If the parents aren't happy with whatever gets worked out or ordered or forced upon them, you might see some reluctance from the children to accept it because they're reading off of their parents' reactions to things. So I had parent-teacher conferences this fall, and both teachers told me they had that my girls were the happiest in their classrooms. I'm very proud of that, and I think it's a result of my co-parent and I working very, very hard to maintain all is well, and as a result, we have very happy children.
Let me ask you something, Angela, because to get to that takes some time, more time for some people because of where they are in that particular split, right? So you had good communication, you were good examples, all of that, but some people, you know, they're emotionally distraught and drained and hurt and a lot of things. So what would be your advice if there's somebody out there who really wants to be fair, and maybe both really want to be fair? How do they get to the point where the child becomes the focus and they can somehow at least a little bit let go of all the emotional baggage that some people are carrying with them?
It's an excellent question. I had been a divorce lawyer for 13 years by the time I was divorcing, so I knew to emotionally check out. And my co-parent had a similar ability. He's also a lawyer, so I don't, you know, all of us think we're heartless, and perhaps that helped. But it is true that if parents can step back and look at their true intentions related to their children, it requires that you eliminate any of the bad feelings that you're having about the situation that involved you and your spouse, and focus exclusively on what is best for your children. You have to, I counsel my clients on this all of the time. Anything that's happened between the two of you is not really the business of what's happening with respect to your children moving forward. People have to dig deep. It is very tough stuff to get through divorce. I was lucky in that there was not a lot of emotional upset. Neither one of us had hurt the other, or there wasn't fault, if you will, related to the decline of our marriage. It just was one of those things that happened. A lot of people are in different situations where they're dealing with some level of trust being damaged or some event, and parents need to grieve through the divorce. And as part of that, I believe they need to start to separate those feelings versus looking at what's really best for their children moving forward. Because shared parenting or not, they need to show up as good parents. And to do that, it means that you do not keep fueling your children with negative ideas about the other parent. We regardless of the parenting time, we could all agree that's not good for children.
So Chris, what about those scenarios, and I'm not going to play either the mom or the dad here, but what about those scenarios where it really wasn't shared prior to the split? So you had a parent who was absent quite a bit of time, be it because of work or whatever the case may be. This shared parenting starts at a 50-50 notion and then works its way out from there. But again, what about those relationships where honestly it wasn't really 50-50 to begin with?
I think that looking over to Angela and thinking the younger couples, that'd be you. I think that in the more younger couples, there's more and more sharing of the parenting responsibilities going on now. That's becoming the norm. As women are seeking and being successful in their careers by necessity, the parents are having to share the responsibilities that back in the 60s and 50s they didn't have to do. And so guys, gals finding that they like that and it works well for them. So and there's research to support that as well, that what happens now with the shared parenting, a 50-50 plan, it more or less mirrors the roles of the household now. So it's not like, and this is one of our bigger problems, it's not like people, in most cases, are one absent parent and one not. Most cases have shared parenting already. But a lot of the problem that we have is that when people are looking at this problem, they're looking at it back in the days of Leave It to Beaver and thinking that that's how things are, but that's not how things are any longer. So the research shows that when you have a shared parenting situation, it's mirroring what was done before, and it works well, and again focuses on not the parents, but what's best for the long term for the kids.
Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute, but one thing I did want to bring up is, because it's something that comes out quite a bit, is the child support factor. So if we start at 50-50, and that's the presumption moving forward, and then we just kind of work together from there, how is that impacted?
Child support under the current regime is if the parents are going to share joint legal and joint physical custody, which they would do under a 50-50 or 60-40 scenario, then a calculation is done with our current guidelines that says that we're going to calculate how many days dad's going to have, and we're going to calculate how many days mom's going to have. We look at mom's income, we look at dad's income, we figure out what dad would have to pay mom for the days that mom's going to have the child. We figure out what mom would have to pay dad for the time that dad's going to have the child, and we net those numbers out. And then that becomes the amount of child support that gets paid one person to the other. So we don't have this constant exchange of checks every month. Mm-hmm. It's we do a net calculation, and that's how child support's paid now.
Okay, in the spirit of being supportive of the child, right? Talk to us about the benefits here. We hit that a little bit earlier, but go into some more of the benefits for the children in terms of shared parenting.
Sure. The benefits are long-term. Children, as they age, express that that's the arrangement that they really liked, that works best. As Angela said, her kids are expressing to her, this is fair. It preserves the relationship between the child and the parent. A lot of times when you have this every other weekend scenario, 2 to 8 weeks in the summertime and some holidays, that hurts. That really, really hurts when you have an involved parent who now is told, no, you can't see the child except for 2 days out of 14. That's very, very painful. And as a result of that, a lot of parents will drop out. So when you have a 50-50 Shared Parenting Act put in place, now the parents are there. They're there all the time. They don't lose that relationship with the child. That benefits the child. It also benefits the parent. A lot of our parents get a lot of self-worth off the fact that they're a parent, a good parent, their kids are doing well, and they have a lot of pride in that. It also does away with a lot of the battling. Now, if you really step back and think about this, if you change the nexus of a divorce, where it's not going to be I win, you lose, but we first approach the problem, the divorce with, we know that each of us are going to share our children, because that's what the law now requires, unless there's a reason not to. Then we don't have to talk about I'm better than you are, or I'm the primary parent and you're not the primary parent. We change everything. Everything changes. So mediation becomes more successful. We have mandatory mediation now in Nebraska. But just picture how this works. Usually you don't have mediation until after there's been a temporary hearing. And at the temporary hearing, the judge looks at affidavits. Nobody's interviewed, just affidavits. And that judge then makes a decision as to where the kid should go on a temporary basis until there can be a trial that might be a year later. The couple that you're asking to go to mediation or forcing to go to mediation now is in the midst of their darkest time. There's hurt, there's rejection, there may be feelings of betrayal, things of that nature, and yet we're going to put them in a room and we're going to say, you guys need to work out a parenting plan, when the judge has just said, Dad, you win, or Mom, you win, and the loser gets every other weekend, 2 days out of 14, and maybe some holidays and some time in the summer. There's no incentive for someone to negotiate in good faith. Mm-hmm. And so you end up getting settlements instead of agreements. And there's a huge difference between a settlement and an agreement. Mediated agreements are agreements that people tend to stick with and they abide by, and that's what the research also shows. I mean, this topic has been researched to the nails, and there's a whole lot of things that would yield much more benefits, like domestic violence. If you have shared parenting, domestic violence decreases. That's not what one would think originally. That seems counterintuitive. But over half of first-time domestic violence occurs after separation. And it occurs in a scenario where you have winners and losers. And no, you can't have them because it's not your time. It's my time. So if you have a shared parenting arrangement put in place, no one's doing the math anymore. We're not trying to count minutes. Benefits are huge.
Okay. And Angela, he touched on it, and you're living it, but just briefly, benefits for the parents.
I would say that it has reduced the angst that goes along with divorce. Last night on the soccer field, I'm coaching my daughter's team, and he comes to pick up our other daughter, and we can stand on the field and talk for 15 minutes, and I feel proud of that. And that has a lot of value to me, that I can have him and his new wife come to my daughter's birthday party at my house. That makes me feel proud, and it demonstrates to our daughters that you are capable of working through disagreements and having a pleasant ending, or as good as it could be. So for parents, I think it is empowering to be able to continue a good working relationship, but I would say it's hard work. It's absolutely, it's not an easy thing to maintain and preserve that type of goodwill, but I think the benefits of it are huge.
Okay, thank you. We do want to put up a few websites before we run out of time here, so we'll put those up now. NebraskaDivorce.com, NebraskaLegislature.gov, and NPR.org. And I know, Chris, you said you wanted to add one to that?
We have a website for our law firm as well. It's HastingsLaw.com. We have a statewide practice, so we're traveling up and down the interstate all the time. So if you want to find out more about what we are and what we do, HastingsLaw.com.
Okay, Chris, Angela, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your time and expertise on shared parenting. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.